Now, I know what I'm about to read to you might not make very much sense, but hopefully, if you've paid attention to the news in your local area and you've just paid attention to politics at a national stage, then you would know that student loan debt is at the top of the menu of things to be either chipped away at or to be carefully handled, if you will, in the coming years, coming months. This article is going to be a supplemental reason as to why the ID Act of 2020 must take place. These Americans fled the country to escape their giant student loan debt. One moment. I'm at MSN. I'll do my best to remember the link. This is in the money section. This is in the money section. Chad Haig considered living in a cave to escape his student loan debt. He had a friend doing it, but after some plotting, he settled on what he considered a less risky plan. This year, he relocated to a jungle in India. I've put America behind me, Haig, 29, said. Today, he lives in a concrete house in the village of Uchadakara. Uchada, Uchakata, there we go, Uchakata, for $50 a month. His backyard is filled with coconut trees and chickens. I saw 4 elephants just yesterday, he said, adding that he hopes to never to set foot in a Walmart again. More than 9,000 miles away from Colorado, Haig said his student loans don't feel real anymore. It's kind of like if a tree falls in the woods and no one hears it, does it really exist? He said. Some student loan borrowers are packing their bags and fleeing from the U.S. to other countries where the cost of living is often lower and debt collectors wield less power over them. Although there is no national data on how many people left the United States because of student loan debt, borrowers tell their stories of doing so on Facebook, Groundspan, Reddit channels, and how-to advice is offered on personal finance websites. It may be an issue if it may be an issue. We see an uptick if this we see an uptick in it and if the trend keeps up, said Barmak Nasserian, Director of Federal Relations at the American Association of State Colleges and Universities, meaning they're watching it. Meaning they're hoping that more people don't do this before the ID Act of 2020 jumps off. Outstanding student debt in the U.S. has tripled over the last decade and is projected to swell to $2 trillion, what? By 2022. Average debt at graduation is currently around $30,000, up from an inflation-adjusted $16,000 in the early 1990s. Meanwhile, salaries for new bachelor degree recipients, also accounting for inflation, have remained almost flat over the last few decades. Haig's student loan balance of around $20,000 isn't as large as the burden shouldered by many other borrowers, but he said difficulty finding a college-level job in the U.S. has made that debt oppressive nonetheless. If you're not making a living wage, he said, $20,000 in debt is devastating. And he's fucking absolutely right. He struggled to come up with the $300 a month he owed upon graduation. The first work he found after he left the University of Northern Colorado in 2011, when the recession's effects were still palpable. You could still feel them, they were still visible. Was on again, off again hours at a factory, unloading trucks and construction toy rockets on an assembly line. He then went back to school to pursue a master's degree in comparative literature at the University of Colorado Boulder. After that, he tried to make it as an adjuncted professor, but he still could barely scrape a living together with the one class a semester he was assigned. Haig had some hope restored when he landed a full-time work as a medical courier in Denver, delivering urine and blood samples to the hospital. However, he was disappointed to find out that he brought home just $1,700 a month. He had little money left over after he paid his student loan bill. He couldn't afford an apartment in the city where rents have been rising sharply. He lived with his mother and rarely went out with friends. I couldn't make the math work in America, Haig said. Milestones that seem like pipe dreams back home, like starting a family and owning a house, are now on the horizon in India. Last year, he married an Indian citizen, a professor at a local college. He has a 5 year spousal visa. According to a new country, he admitted has not been adjusting to a new country. He admitted has not been entirely easy. Some toilets here are holes in the ground. You squat over. Some toilets here are holes in the ground. You squat over. Haig said. Recently, he ate spoiled goat meat at a local restaurant and landed in the emergency room. Still, he said, I have a higher standard of living in a third world country than I would in America because of my student loans. Having another country to escape student debt is risky, experts say. Moving to another country to escape student debt is risky, experts say. If the person wants or needs to return to the United States, they'll find their loan balance has only grown while they were gone, thanks to compound interest, collection charges, and late fees. Although the education department typically can't garnish someone wages if they're working for a company outside of the United States, it can take up to 15% of their social security benefits when they start collecting. The loans do not disappear when you become an expat, said Mark Kantrowitz, a student loan expert. The education department did not respond to a request for comment. Chad Albright attended Millersville University in Pennsylvania, where he studied communications and history. He graduated as the Great Recession was beginning in December 2007 and couldn't find anyone to hire him in his chosen field. I went to interview after interview after interview, Albright, 39, said. Still, he had $30,000 in student loans and was soon faced with a monthly bill of around $400. Unable to support himself, he moved in with his parents in Lancaster and worked as a pizza delivery man. There was anger, Albright said. I still couldn't believe I couldn't find a job in America. He fell behind on his student loans and feared the education department would garnish his wages. Albright's credit score tanked as a result of his repayment troubles, making it difficult for him to buy a car and to land certain jobs, since some employers now pull credit reports. I feel that college ruined my life, Albright said. Seeing no future for himself in the United States, he decided to move to China in 2011 in the city of Zhongshan. He discovered he loved teaching students English. Unlike when he was delivering greasy boxes of pizza, he found his work meaningful and fulfilling. Though he earned just around $1,000 a month in China, the school he was teaching covered most of his rent, and cost of living was much lower than in Pennsylvania. A few years later, Albright moved to Ukraine, where he is now a permanent resident. He first taught in Kiev, and now does so in Odessa, a port city in the Black Sea. He has no plans to return to the United States. I am much happier in Ukraine, he said, adding that he hasn't checked his student loan account in nearly 8 years. There are more reasonable ways of dealing with student debt, said Nasserian at the American Association of State Colleges and Universities. Struggling borrowers should enter into one of the government's income-based repayment plans instead, in which the income bill will be capped at a portion of their income, he said. Some payments wind up being as little as $0 a month. But the fact that people are taking drastic measures should bring scrutiny to the larger student loan system, said Allen College, founder of the Student Loans Justice. Any rational person who learns that they are fleeing the country as a result of the student loan will conclude that something has gone horribly awry with this lending system. Katrina Williams was in a rush to find a job after she graduated the University of Southern Alabama in 2013. She was looking at a monthly student loan bill of $700. I had to do whatever I could do so I could pay on the loans. That's horrible. So you know what she had to do. She picked up multiple jobs as a part-time barista at Starbucks, a substitute teacher, and a delivery woman for the USPS parcel. At one point, she worked a full-time job at call center for Sears. I was working every day. I had enough money left over to put gas in the car. She lived with her mother and couldn't afford health insurance. Williams had a friend who moved to Japan, and the idea of leaving the U.S. grew on her. In 2015, she moved to Chiba, also to teach English to students. I love my work, she said. Her job sponsors her visa. She has her own apartment now and doesn't have to work 7 days a week anymore. Yet Williams misses her relationships back home. She hasn't been able to make any friends in Japan. She thinks about returning to the U.S., but knows she'll be welcome back to wage garnishments and endless calls from collection agencies. Her student loan debt has ballooned to well over $100,000. I wish I could come back to America and not be scared, she said. If you guys think that this ID Act of 2020 has nothing to do with people fleeing the country and doing stuff like this, not just shutting down your ability to move around normally, but the idea that you might leave and run away because you're afraid of the hammer, the clamp, the vice grips that are coming. They could see what was happening. They understood. It's not just wage garnishment, it's going to jail that could possibly take place. And you're going to see it more often. I warned you. I warned you. I warned you. When it comes to fruition, I'm just going to put my head down and act like I don't see it happening.